Testing.
Or at least some background noise. Yeah, I can hear me and I think you.
Oh, it's like there's a feedback loop.
Yeah, so I can. It sounds like it's kind of hissy, but um, yeah, it's working.
Well, actually, I can improve the microphone a little bit further. I didn't change anything. Possibly. Okay. So this microphone is a little bit sensitive. So, can you hear me over the YouTube channel? Is it high or low? Okay. Perfect. Yeah, and I can actually repeat questions in the stream, and yeah. seems like we're all set up, and we'll go ahead and get started in maybe 9 minutes or so, right? we'll go ahead and get started right about now. Can everyone on Discord hear me? Yeah, just make sure to mute if you're on Discord and you're not speaking. Yeah, there's still a little bit of an echo. I'm muted on Discord and I'm just talking over the stream. Yep, it's me. Yep, I think it's about maybe 5 seconds. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'll listen to the Discord and just mute YouTube if you're on Discord. Okay, so I think we're ready to get started. Yes, I'm intentionally muted on Discord. See, I'm trying to work both of these input streams at the same time. We'll just go ahead and get started if you're all ready to go. Okay. All right. So thanks everyone for coming today. I know that it's kind of a busy day. Secondarily to I think I'll have to turn down my Discord audio because I'm hearing both at the same time, and it's not a question. It's hard to kind of focus. But I know that I know everyone had a busy schedule today. I know there's an inauguration, and so I'm glad that you guys were able to join. And we'll go ahead and get started on this short introduction to Terraform. Infrastructure as code is, well, I only came to infrastructure as code, the kind of the methodology of it, quite recently. I when I first was exposed to it, when I was first exposed to it, that I hear you guys on Discord. Just so you know, like I can hear you. I'm talking over the YouTube stream. Okay. So, sorry, back to the presentation. So, I kind of came to this like not really understanding the whole thing. I thought infrastructure as code was kind of a complex topic, and I didn't really start learning it until I had a friend of mine introduce me to what Terraform was. I was using Bash scripts to spin up things through server APIs, and I would interface with all different types of APIs so that my scripts could report back on whether or not I have the servers all spun up and ready. So this has really simplified my work, and I didn't know that infrastructure as code was such an easy thing to accomplish. It does take a little bit of upfront work to kind of convert some of your servers into this config, but there are a lot of benefits that you can reap from it. So, oh, and obviously you might be able to tell I'm using a different slide deck. Usually, I'm sure that not many people are like fascinated by infrastructure as code, so I went ahead and I adapted the NSA slide deck for this presentation. I don't know. After a while of working with this slide deck, it started to get worse and worse. So this is just what we got for today. Should keep it a little bit interesting, the topic. And we'll have a couple demos a little bit later on. But I'm Nathan. I've used Linux for about 13 years now, and I make some security software that I've done a presentation on with the Linux Users Group before. And this is my second presentation, and it's just covering the infrastructure as code stuff. So right into the subject matter. Terraform is, you could just think about it as a standards tool. You can run in Bash. There's no like GUI. There's no like official like GUI that you can use. There's a cloud service that they offer, but it's really not necessary. And what it does is you can turn pretty much anything that is a provider in Terraform into a config file. And the amount of providers that they offer is overwhelming. There's, I'll probably just go to this just to show you guys how many there are. But just I named a couple on this slide: the DNS records, firewall settings, access control .ad, and I'll pull up this link just so you can see just how many providers there are. So, I mean, this is like the first page. You can see some of the ones I named. But there's like 700 different providers, different configs you can use with your Terraform configs to interface with them and not have to write scripts or programs around the APIs that are provided by each one of these services. Like a while back, we're on page 2, but I've used like DigitalOcean and Cloudflare, and you could just automatically set like the DNS records for your new services. You could set up a new cloud virtual machine by DigitalOcean. Just a couple examples. Maybe you could run like some pipeline in GitLab. All of these are really useful, and Terraform kind of melds them all together and makes them easy to operate from a config file. But those are some of the benefits. I'll go into more of the benefits in a second. But I wanted to show why Terraform is like a really useful tool. So whenever I've worked at a position or a job doing Linux server administration, it's kind of gone like this. Even for my personal servers, I've had to go through this process of, one, you have to choose the initial specifications of the server. So you have to choose like how much RAM you need, like how many CPUs or maybe even virtual CPUs that you need on this server. And you need to choose the operating system. There's just many different specifications you have to do for the initial pre-planning phase, or actually the planning phase of the server. And then you build the server itself. And that just requires you to set up the distribution, the OS distribution, and install the software on it. You set the firewall up. That might require you to work with some networking equipment on the perimeter. Any miscellaneous networking, like setting the host name, setting up the DNS, being the next step. And then the thing is, after you set it up, you can either document it or you can just forget how you set it up after a year. And more often than not, it's the latter, right? Because a lot of people are on a time crunch, and once you're done with one server, you kind of got to move on to the next thing. You could try documenting as you complete it, but then you're kind of hoping that whoever is going to set the server back up again for you, if you need to rebuild it, which is the last step here, if you need to rebuild it, that person has to interpret all of your instructions, and perhaps they don't know administration as well as you, or maybe even it's yourself, and you just don't even remember, like maybe you forgot a step along the way when you documented it. This is all kind of a normal process. Also common is when you have a server that you set up very quickly and you didn't document it at all, and then you're just like, what actually what was involved in setting this server up? After a year, you don't remember that information, and quite frequently someone else has set something else up on the server, and you just have no attribution information. So that's kind of like the monolithic server design. It's some stuff that some part of that is what Docker is supposed to solve, right? Having containers and having kind of that the Docker file that you can check into a build service. But the infrastructure side is more what Terraform targets. So instead of all of that, instead of that entire process for the provisioning of the infrastructure, for Terraform, it's as simple as running first when you initialize your kind of repository or the place that you're going to build the server from, you just run Terraform in it. That's the first step. And you only need to do that once. It just gets the providers and the APIs that it can connect with. And then you run Terraform apply. And that will plan out, it implicitly plans out any of the changes that need to take place in the infrastructure, and it will deploy them. And here's the really nice part about Terraform. It basically does a diff of what is already in place and what hasn't been put in place, and it allows you to only change the things that aren't already there. So if you were to update your Terraform config file, you could just run Terraform apply, and it won't destroy your entire server setup. It won't delete any of your networking information, your DNS entries, or any of that. It will only recognize, okay, there's only one thing that's actually changed here, and that's that you wanted to have a trying to get a good example here. I'll just use DNS again. You just wanted an additional DNS entry on your provider, and it'll go out and it'll make that DNS entry. And the way that Terraform works is that it keeps that catalog in the state file, and it will reach back out to it to see if the state is still synchronized with the local Terraform state. So all this really comes down to a single config file and also a state file that Terraform automatically makes, and to keep track of what's probably out there, and it verifies it whenever you apply it. And after that, nothing. You're done. It's extremely fast at setting up infrastructure, and that's all there really is to it. So I'll just go enumerate some of the benefits on this slide, and then we'll start going into the demos. I try to keep the slide deck pretty short so that it's not overwhelming at all. This is supposed to be a very simple introduction to infrastructure as code. But the first benefit I've listed here is that you can easily audit your servers. I've administered servers that I've come back to, and I've just wondered, who exactly set up X server. For example, I've worked places that there's been like an unauthorized proxy set up in the environment, and the proxy is like a squid proxy, and it just came out of nowhere, and no one knew who set up the squid proxy server, but it allowed you to tunnel through the network. Obviously, pretty bad thing with firewall rules in place. With infrastructure as code, with having your infrastructure stored in that config file, you can see who set up that server, because if you have this kind of like common access point where you set up the servers and you deploy them through Terraform, you could see, well, X individual set up the server on this state because they're the ones that created this line in the config file if it's version controlled. And the server that deploys Terraform could periodically check to see if the environment is up to date and accurate with what is in the config files. So it's great for auditing. I actually use it a little bit further than that. I actually neglected to include a diagram in here, but there are other programs out there like Ansible, like Chef and Puppet that everyone here might be a little bit more familiar with, but those are actually for a different stage, right? Those are for the software installation stage. It's for managing the configuration of that server. Terraform is more on the infrastructure provisioning side, but you could actually use it for the config deployment, and that's one of my favorite things. It's just like I can actually have one file, one config file that is designed to deploy an entire server and everything that's supposed to be on it. So it might be a little bit, it might be heresy to use Terraform like this, but then again, it's also very nice having one file that describes everything that a server is supposed to do and how it's made. So within minutes, I could turn off this server that it could take days to manually set up and then set it right back up in minutes. So if there's a potential compromise, for instance, if the server was hacked, very similar benefits to Docker containers, which there's an adapter for that, or rather there's a provider for that. You could just easily shut off the server, spin it back up, and there's no worry about whether or not you need whether or not there's been some kind of malicious code embedded in the server. So yeah, it saves you a lot of time, and even for just simple updates, it saves you time. If you have to rebuild your server, you could just change one of the lines and just quickly shut it down, destroy it. That's the terminology for Terraform is destroy. And then you can just do Terraform apply again, and it redeploys the whole thing, and then you're back up and running. So the provider's another huge benefit. I can't tell you how many times I wrote a script for another API or downloaded a new CLI client. If you've ever used the Amazon or DigitalOcean CLIs, they usually provide you like some provider-specific CLI. It's not managing a repository or anything, and the syntax differs per provider, and it's easy to have to get yourself into the habit of designing this config file for one version, and then it just completely changes, or not your config file, but your script for one version, it completely changes their API on the server provider's end. Terraform obviously handles all of that, and there's backwards compatibility. So you don't have to write scripts for those APIs anymore for all 700 odd of their providers. And the last benefit I've got listed here is that you don't have to document your server builds. So much nicer to not document everything, because all of it is really documented by the config file itself. So I'm just going to pause here before we get to the demonstrations. I believe that's next, right? Yep. Are there any questions so far about what Terraform is or what it does? Just checking, because I'm pretty sure my Discord audio works fine. Can anyone say hello? Just so I can verify there's no questions. Well, I hear my feedback, so I'm pretty sure that there were no questions. If I did miss any questions, please just send a message. sorry, if you have any questions, just go ahead and drop them in the Discord channel, and I'll be able to read them. Or also IRC. I'll just double check that no one said anything in IRC. Yeah, so I'm obviously simplifying some of this, and you can use Terraform plan to show like what changes are that are going to be made. And as of a recent version of Terraform, they simplified it so that apply automatically does it's like a takes both steps of plan and apply, and it just does them all at once. And it verifies whether or not you want to make those changes to your infrastructure. So you don't really need to do planning these days with Terraform. You could just run apply, and then it'll ask you if you really want to do it. But plan is another Terraform command that you can use. So I'm going to go ahead and I'll just demonstrate Terraform's usage. And I'll also blow up my terminal so you can see a little bit bigger. Large. All right. So I have a central Terraform directory, and inside of it, I manage all the things that I can. I manage with Terraform. So my goal for this server was to have everything managed inside Terraform. I was kind of spinning up arbitrary servers, like one-off servers when I needed them through different providers, and I wanted to see how well I could get along, get how far I can go with just Terraform infrastructure as code. And so I've got demonstrations directory, which I'm going to be using to demonstrate the different providers that Terraform offers. I have one directory for my personal server, and I can actually show what that does. It's kind of neat what you can do with Terraform and providers. It's not just spinning up servers, right? I mean, the architecture is, or rather the infrastructure is the neat part. You can spin up different things. And just some other like personal stuff I use it for. So let's go ahead and just do the first demonstration. So I have it titled Learn01. And you don't need to have this naming scheme, but what you do need to have is a file that ends in .tf, and here's what it looks like. So I have just a very simple Terraform file. It's actually not that long. I can zoom out so you can see the whole thing. That's the entire file. And this describes an entire server. So what it says is I need to use the AWS provider. It sets some config options. So these are config options, and these are resources. And resources are the things that Terraform goes out, checks for, and creates if necessary. So in this example, it makes an AWS key pair, and it also spins up an EC2 server. So we're going to go ahead and try this. First thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to make sure that I don't have any existing Terraform states or data, because I want to demonstrate what Terraform init does. So got rid of those. Let's pull this back up. So Terraform init. We'll get the provider. And as a fun little exercise, I'm going to log into AWS at the same time. I'm going to try to set up an EC2 service. If I can even find a place to log in. Okay, AWS Management Console. All right. I'm just going to go ahead and move this down a little bit. You can see that I have, it initialized Terraform, so it's ready to deploy. So I just do Terraform, and then, man, I'm blanking. Terraform apply. And it'll ask me, are you sure you want to create these services? You can actually pass a config flag to say automatically approve some of that stuff, but it'll show you what it creates. It says it'll create a T2 micro instance with all the config settings we specified and the key that we wanted. And we just say, yeah, we'll go ahead and create it. And while we do that, I'll go ahead and sign into Amazon. Yep. Yep. And I'm not really that concerned about my multi-factor code being shared. It's like one-time code, so you guys can write it down if you like. So here I am, I'm signing into the EC2 console. EC2. I haven't even loaded the page yet. I feel like Amazon makes some of this deliberately complicated. So I'm gonna have to find how to set up the service. Instances. So first you gotta go instances. Notice that it's already done. It's already created the server. And we can actually see the information about the server here. So Terraform status. So we can go to, or not status, but Terraform show. I meant to say show. And you can see all the parameters that it used when setting up the service. And we can also see the public IP of the service. Let's see here, SSH. Yeah, I'll just go ahead and use this little fancy one-liner that won't save the information to my known host file. And this is the server. It's got Nginx already running, and we could verify that locally, and we can also verify that remotely by just running curl. Give it in our browser. That's what browsers are for. Ta-da! So Terraform completed that fairly quickly before we actually even got to the page. You can see the instance running here. We're going to try to do it through EC2's regular interface. So first you have to understand like what AMIs are and to select which AMI you want. That requires like going to a marketplace, but by default you can choose the Amazon Linux AMI. I'm not sure if this is the latest one. I know that there is a new one that came out recently. This would already be specified in the Terraform config, so select that. There's a lot of parameters up here that you can review. So like it's not just the instance type, you have to review like the specifications that you actually want on the server out of the, I don't know, 200 different options you have here, but also how many instances you want, the network information. If you really just jump straight to review, it's going to complain that you have like security problems with your EC2 instance. So, I mean, I usually spend like 10, 15 minutes or so just researching all like the terminology and what I might need for each one of these. I guess you could get a little more efficient at it with the security groups and the tags and the storage that you have to set up. But long story short is that it takes exponentially longer to set up even the most basic services in the actual like provider's interface than it would be to set it up through Terraform. And obviously, for some providers that are designed to be easier, so like DigitalOcean, the difference is not as great, but it also using Terraform allows you to rapidly prototype and all the other benefits that we discussed. So I'm actually not going to set up this system, but it's just a good comparison of like how long it takes to set up these systems and to just destroy it. Terraform destroy, and it just wants you to confirm that you want to destroy your critical server. This is just Nginx, so it doesn't matter to me. And I'm just going to go back to the console to show you that it is shutting down that service. Yeah, I want to tell them what I think about the interface. It's not very good. So it says terminating, and you can see it already destroyed it here. So that's it. That's the crash course on setting things up with Terraform. It set up this little state file that says what the current state is of your infrastructure. Obviously, it's gone now, so I can't even curl it. Honestly, I'm not sure what it'll even show if you do Terraform show. Yeah, there's nothing out there. So that's what this very simple one does. In many tutorials and examples, they give you something similar to this, which is just a very small file, just to try it out for the first time. And you could use any provider for this. I just chose AWS. So I'm gonna switch back to the presentation here. That was the first demonstration. Does anyone have any questions about the first server? I'll turn up the volume on my device and turn on IRC. Thanks for joining. Anyone have any questions? Okay, I will take that as a no, and we'll go ahead and move on to the second demo. And if I did miss your question in IRC, I'll come back to IRC the second demo. So my second demo is a basic Docker container. This Terraform file is even smaller than the original one. And for a good reason, right? I mean, let's be honest. Docker, if I want to start a Docker container, I would just do docker run nginx, right? It's really not that complicated to do it through the CLI, but I just want to show the extensibility of Terraform. I mean, you can handle almost anything in Terraform itself, and this is what it's doing is it's first saying, I need this provider, I need Docker, and it pulls the latest Nginx image and it forwards the ports appropriately. So the port forwarding would be like another CLI flag, the name would be another CLI flag, but it's all handled by Terraform. And so I'll just go ahead and try it out. Terraform. I already ran init before this presentation, so we wouldn't have to wait for it to initialize. Yes. So right now it's setting up the Nginx container. If you're not familiar with Nginx, it's just a basic web server. but it has to pull the image down from Docker, which is just Docker we're waiting on. And it's done. So I've got a little alias here. You can see that it's currently running the tutorial. And I will go ahead and curl it. Hello. And there it is. So it's currently running. And we'll just destroy it. Terraform destroy. Really simple. It's that easy to set up Docker containers, and it's almost as easy to set up cloud resources. Okay. Well, I'm actually just, instead of taking questions right now, because I think that was pretty straightforward, we'll go ahead and move on to the last demo. I think that we're basically experts in Terraform right now. So I have a fun Terraform config. So we have here the Utah data center in obviously Utah, made by the NSA, and their storage capacity is 3 to 12 exabytes. And clearly they don't know how to use Terraform, because we're going to set up a server that does just as much. Noobs. So we'll go ahead and set it up now. We're going to jump straight to my fourth exercise, because we don't even need to bother with the third one. So I've got, again, still like one file. You saw the other ones. It was just one file as well. This is a little more complicated. This has a little bit more to it. So I have it set up so that I can easily specify different targets. I have like one for Docker and one for AWS. And we set up the domain, like the DNS entries, and we do that with variables. You can use variables in Terraform scripts, and you can interface with CLI stuff. But you can see, like, here's my Docker file. I'll just have it in line inside the Terraform file, just to control everything from Terraform. And it's going to spin this Docker file up on Amazon on ECS, which allows you to run, ECS Fargate allows you to run Docker containers remotely on Amazon. And you can see, like, it's feeding the information to AWS, the CLI to log into the Docker repository. It sets up a subnet. There's so much networking stuff you have to do for Amazon, and it's all very tedious. But if you have it in a config file like this, it's just a breeze to set up. So what this server is designed to do is it sets up an EFS, and it sets up an EFS mount point on the server. And we're going to go ahead and try it out. So I set up an alias for like automatically approve everything. I just have it say deploy prod. And what this is doing is it's just doing Terraform apply, and it's setting the it's telling it, okay, use the prod resource target, so you can target a certain part of the Terraform file. You don't have to do the entire file. You can specify only certain targets inside the Terraform file, certain resources you want it to create, rather than everything in there. Because if it did everything, it would set up both the Docker one and the Amazon one. This is going to set up just the Amazon service. And hopefully by the time this is completed, we'll have a cloud virtual machine that could rival the NSA's data center in Utah. So doing a lot of work here. It's just what it's doing is it's building the Docker container with all the dependencies that it needs. Mainly, it's just doing SSH and some NFS tools so that it could properly mount the remote volume. And I'll share this at the end of the presentation so you can spin up the server yourself. If you just have Terraform and an AWS account, you'll be able to just configure your system, log in to Amazon, and you can set the system like instantly. Just as fast as I'm setting it up during this presentation. And it's pretty resilient. Like I did not even try this before the presentation. So what we're seeing here is actually the first time I spun up the system in a while. So we'll see if it works. Right now it's creating the mount point on the system. And in parallel, you can see in the background here, it's actually pushing the Docker container that it's supposed to be running as the service. So it's setting up these resources all at the same time instead of sequentially. Sequentially, it would take much longer. So while this is booting up, I'll see if there's any questions. None IRC. I'll listen to Discord for a second. Okay, hearing none from Discord, and I'll just go back to kind of narrating this. It's setting up the task definition, so it's setting up the actual like Docker container itself on Amazon, and these it's kind of ridiculous how many steps you actually need to take on Amazon's side to set up a fairly straightforward service. But this last step here is it's just reading the public IP address. So it's going to actually have the system set up any second now. Okay, so it found the public IP address and it's creating the DNS entry. It's using Route 53 for the DNS, so everything is basically running through Amazon. And once this is finished, which should be done in only a second, I'm going to run a command I've set up also as an alias. Typically, you would run like Terraform show, and then you would enter into that. You'd SSH into that that IP address, but I have an alias set up just to go right to it. All right, so clearly the DNS is not propagated yet, but we don't need it. We can just go straight to it without too much of a hitch. Okay. So, one second. Just remembering the commands. Okay, well actually first let's get the actual IP address, so Terraform show. Here it is. So you can see that is the IP address, the public IP address. And then I'm fairly sure I've got some history. Or I could just use yeah, I'll just do that. the same SSH command I used before. And we're going to SSH as root this time. Okay, so here we are. We're on the server that Terraform created. And we'll look at our, well, I mean, you can see the nice thing about having the Docker containers managed by Amazon is you don't have to worry about the background, like the OS updates or anything like that. That's all taken care of by Amazon. But you can see my disk usage, and this is for the disk. I've got my drive here with 8 exabytes. Note, 8 exabytes. Theirs was 3 to 12, and it cost them $2 billion. So clearly we have the better server here. But it's kind of like a cool example of like how a pretty complex operation like setting up an EFS mount point is done through Amazon and through Terraform, and it's maybe like 100 or 200 lines of config, but it's reusable, and you can easily, I could provision like 10 systems with my 8 exabyte drive. Obviously, you need to pay for that usage if you want to use 8 exabytes. It'll go bankrupt pretty quickly, but it's nice being able to have that kind of storage available from a system that can be trivially set up through Terraform and just as easily destroyed. I think I do have this alias destroy. Yep, I have this alias. So that was, and you'll see it destroy every one of the components that was taking up space in my Amazon console. If you're ever setting up these services manually, just imagine the amount of effort you would need to take to track down like every part of that was set up, all the networking stuff, all the roles, like the EM roles, the integrated access manager roles, like the subnets, the obviously the services, but yeah, the networking is just it's a huge pain. But having something like this, it automatically just cleans up for you, and you don't have to worry about all those details. So I'm going to look at it, the questions on IRC one last time before I switch over to just showing you a little bit of what I have for my server. Taking questions on IRC, and I am also listening to Discord now. Okay, none. I guess that all made sense. Usually people blink at there being 8 exabytes available on a drive, but I don't know. Maybe you guys work with more. So I'm just going to show some of the practical usages of what I use it for besides like the demonstration stuff. I have dynamic DNS. So instead of using some like dynamic DNS service, I have it set up through Terraform. So here's the entire script. It just gets the IP address, and it sets it in Amazon. It's super easy to do dynamic DNS, and you can use it on cron, like what I have here, cron tab L. You see it every night at midnight, and just make sure that the IP address of my server is still accurate, and it works very well. I don't need to use some proprietary client. I don't need to set up an account on like some dynamic DNS service. It's really just that simple. The server itself automatically does it, and it's all pretty transparent as far as how it does it. But I mean, there's obviously some much more complicated things you can do. Um, I sometimes I have like a CI/CD pipeline set up in Terraform because I was just exploring some of the things you can do with it. It basically automatically builds an entire project with the relevant Docker containers, which is cool. I have some. Let's see here. I might be able to show a little bit of this. Yeah, so this sets up like a chat server. It sets up a chat server, and it also sets up some security software while it's at it. I can't really go through the whole file because didn't review it before this presentation, but that's an example. I mean, look at these. All these files are. It's all just one file to manage the entire architecture, and then I also have a data separate. So like I might have a database I preload that it's from a backup, and you can do that from the Docker files while Terraform is driving the whole operation. So a lot of practical uses for Terraform, and I currently have my entire infrastructure running inside of it now. It cut down my total costs by like um, it, my costs were like twice as much before, and now they're a relatively minor amount to pay through the cloud hosting providers that I have. But as I said before, there's many different providers, and you can use this with physical servers as well. So that I'll just kind of conclude what we all saw today. It's really simple to deploy infrastructure as code with Terraform. I'll take those configs, not the private ones, but just some of the stuff that I was demonstrating on our video today. I'll just make them available on IRC and Discord. I'll share some like GitHub Gist links to them, so you can try it out yourself. If you have an Amazon account, it'll be pretty easy to set it up and deploy these servers, play around with them. I wouldn't recommend you use the storage though. Like I wouldn't recommend you fill up to 8 exabytes. That's not my fault if you do. There's some terrible presentation templates that are available here, and hopefully you guys, your eyes aren't bleeding from seeing this like white text on a blue background. But that was my presentation for today, and if you have any questions, I will take them on IRC and Discord now, and if not, that will be the end of the presentation. Yep. Well, I'm hearing none, so glad you guys. Hopefully, you guys got some use out of this presentation, and like I said, I'll upload the Terraform configs, and just let me know if you have any questions. You can obviously DM me in Discord or IRC for at least tonight. Okay. Thanks, guys. Thanks for attending. Thanks for coming out tonight.